Berlin, 1942. The air carries summer dust and smoke of factories far off. Trains rumble through the city, their whistles echoing off walls plastered with propaganda posters. And there, on a quiet bridge over the Havel River, a woman is standing all by herself. Her shoes are worn, her coat too thin for the evening chill. She holds the railing with both hands, staring down at the dark water beneath her. From the far end of the bridge, footsteps approach, measured, deliberate, the sound of polished leather on stone. A German officer, a Wehrmacht lieutenant, slows his pace. He sees the figure ahead, hesitating at the edge. The officer's name is Heinz Drossel. He doesn't know her name yet. He only knows despair when he sees it. "Miss," he calls softly. "Please don't," he said. She turns her face, and for a moment she sees not a man but the uniform that has destroyed her world. Her name is Marianne Hirschfeld, and she is Jewish. To her, that gray-green jacket means death. But the man inside it is different. Heinz Drossel was born in Berlin in 1916 into a middle-class family that highly valued music, books, and morality. His father had been an officer in the Great War, a man who returned home with medals but no illusions. That is, he told his son that honor was not the same as obedience. Politics was spoken in a whisper at home. His parents despised the Nazis. In their shouting and parades, they saw an end to everything decent in Germany. Heinz studied law at the University of Berlin. He loved reason, order, the idea that truth could be found through justice. He dreamed of a quiet life, possibly as a lawyer or judge. But in 1939, reason ended. The draft notice arrived like a sentence. Refusal meant execution, and so, against his will, Heinz became a soldier. He reported for duty in a system already infected with ideology. His superiors asked for loyalty not to law, but to Hitler. He would not join the Nazi Party. A small act, largely unnoticed at first, but dangerous. He did wear the uniform, but never the belief, the Eastern Front. A place where winter itself seemed an enemy. His unit crossed into the Soviet Union in 1941. The campaign was brutal. Endless mud, endless dying. The men froze in the trenches. The machine guns chattered, day and night, and humanity evaporated. Heinz watched officers execute prisoners. He saw civilians herded like animals, villages burned for convenience. He heard laughter after murder. Day by day, his conscience fought a losing battle against orders. He wrote home to his parents, careful coded letters, describing difficult days and heavy thoughts. He said it in such a way that the censors never knew what he meant. Once, his men captured several young Soviet soldiers, frightened boys, barely armed. The standing order was clear, no prisoners. He looked into their faces, dirt, frostbite, terror, and thought of his own reflection. He walked away, fired a shot in the air, and ordered them to run. He said upon interrogation that they had escaped at night. He wrote in his journal that night, "I am no saint, but I am still a human being." In 1942, he received short leave and headed back home to Berlin. The city was weary-looking, with ration lines, blackout curtains, and whispers of neighbors gone missing. The war felt far away, yet its shadow was everywhere. One evening, walking along the Havel, he saw the woman on the bridge. He later said that an eternity had passed during that moment. The air's stillness, the color of the water, and the sound of her breathing. He spoke softly, afraid any sudden word would break her will to live. As she turned, he saw recognition, not of him, but of danger. He introduced himself simply as a friend. She didn't believe him until she saw his eyes. He took her by the hand, led her down from the railing, and asked her name. "Marianne," she whispered. He took her to the empty apartment of his parents. They had fled Berlin for safety, and gave her food, a blanket, and a night's peace. He knew the punishment for helping a Jew, death by hanging. Still, he stayed. In the morning, he found her a safer hiding place. She thanked him with tears in her eyes before she left. He said quietly, "You owe me nothing. Live, that is enough." Then he returned to the front. The war had grown even darker back in the east. The SS followed the army now. Cleaning up, they called it. Heinz saw what cleaning up meant. Villages emptied, corpses buried in shallow snow. He couldn't stop it, but he could refuse to help. He acted with precision in patrols, reports, and logistics. But when he could, quietly shielded civilians. He disobeyed certain commands. Others he completely disregarded. He never spoke of it to his men. He simply acted differently. One evening, a comrade turned to him and said, "Why bother? They are all enemies." Heinz replied, "Because someday this war will end and I will still have to live with myself." Germany was collapsing by 1945. The Soviets had crossed the Oder River. The world was falling apart. Heinz's unit received new orders from the SS to make a final stand, a suicidal counterattack meant to prove loyalty. He looked at the faces of his soldiers, exhausted, starving, barely men, and knew that further obedience now meant meaningless death. He refused when the SS commander ordered him to lead an attack. He said, "The war is lost. I will not waste lives to honor your madness." The officer called him a traitor. Drossel kept standing. Shots rang out moments later. A brief firefight broke out, German against German. In the confusion, some of Drossel's men began to shoot at the SS men, not wanting to die for their cruelty. For this insubordination, Heinz was arrested, beaten, and sentenced to death. But before the sentence could be carried out, Soviet artillery began to fall. He managed to escape during the retreat. In a few days, the area was liberated by the Red Army. He was free, but the country he served was in ashes. He returned to Berlin in May 1945, and it was no longer the city he had left. Burnt-out trams, shattered glass, the smell of smoke and decay, people moved like ghosts through the rubble. He found his parents alive, living on potatoes and silence. Together, they waited for something that resembled normal life to return. Then, weeks later, there was a knock at the door. The woman outside was thin, with a shawl clutched tightly around her shoulders. It was Marianne. She had survived. Through concealing herself, arrests, and escape, someone had remembered the officer who helped her, and she had searched for him. He was speechless. He cried for the first time since the war began. They married in 1946, the soldier and the woman from the bridge. Their life together was quiet, unadorned. He became a judge, dedicating himself to rebuilding justice in a country that had forgotten it. She returned to music and taught children to play the violin. They never said much about the war. When they did, they spoke without hatred, only sorrow and disbelief. Drossel avoided attention in peacetime. He was neither hero nor victim, just a man who wanted to live honestly. But his past came back to haunt him. Each time he walked into a courtroom, he remembered those that he could not save. At the sound of marching boots in a parade, he would flinch. He once told a colleague, "It is easier to die in war than to live afterward with a clean conscience." In the 1980s, journalists began to rediscover stories of quiet resistance, Germans who defied the regime from within. The name of Heinz came up, for instance, but very reluctantly. He agreed to interviews only after long persuasion. In one, he said, "I was no hero. I only did what I thought any decent man would do. The tragedy is that there were not enough of us." He was later recognized by Yad Vashem as righteous among the nations, and in 2004 received the Wallenberg Medal from the University of Michigan for moral courage. Upon being presented with the medal, he said simply, "I am grateful to have lived long enough to see that humanity still matters." He had seen the best and worst of what men could do. He had seen how quickly morality could collapse when authority demands obedience. He had also seen how a single act of mercy could outlive an empire. People asked him what kept him human during such times, and he would say, "Because I could not bear to become what I saw." He once told a classroom of students, "You must give young people the courage to be human." No slogans, no glory. It is simply the insistence that kindness is stronger than ideology. Heinz Drossel died in 2008 at the age of 91. Marianne had died a few years before him. They are buried side by side in the quiet soil of Simonswald. Their tombstone is unassuming: 2 names, 2 dates, and no more. No mention of war or rescue or medals, only silence. And yet, maybe that silence is the point. Certain acts of courage don't need monuments. They live on in memory, their whispers heard across time as a secret passed between those who refused to hate. The story of Heinz Drossel is not one of victory. It is a story about limits, the limits of obedience, the limits of fear, the limits of how much a man can bear before conscience breaks through. He reminds us that even in the most disciplined of armies, even inside the machinery of evil, there are gears that turn the other way, and sometimes that small resistance, invisible, silent, prevents the world from falling fully into darkness. He once said near the end of his life, "I am not proud of what I did. I am grateful that I did not do worse." Perhaps that is the truest kind of humility. And so we remember him, not as an officer or a judge, but as a man who, when surrounded by inhumanity, refused to surrender his own. When the world was asking for killers, he chose to be human.